Grok AI was asked who built the pyramids. The answer shocked everyone. Picture the last block being lowered onto the Great Pyramid 48 centuries ago, and picture something else. That same pyramid's exact measurements, all of them, being fed into a machine that has never been to school, never read a textbook, and has no reputation to protect. No professor to please. No theory to defend. Just numbers. That's the experiment at the center of this video. Someone recently took every hard measurement we have of the Great Pyramid of Giza, the survey data, the angles, the tolerances, the alignments, and asked an AI system a single question. What do the numbers actually say, with no loyalty to any existing theory? What came back wasn't a name. It wasn't a date. It was a list of things that, according to the official story, should not be possible. And by the end of this video, you're going to have to decide for yourself whether that list is a coincidence or a message. Before we go anywhere near the strange part, we owe the standard explanation a fair hearing, because it is not a lazy one. Mainstream archaeology says the Great Pyramid was built for the pharaoh Khufu around 2560 BCE, over roughly 2 decades, by organized crews of skilled Egyptian workers. Not slaves, but paid, fed, and housed laborers. We have found their villages at Giza. We have found their bakeries, their breweries, their bread ovens, their cattle bones. We have found the skeletons of workers whose broken bones were set and healed, meaning someone cared enough to treat them. We have papyrus logs describing barges of limestone moving down the Nile. We have quarry marks and painted gang names on hidden blocks. Crews who signed their work like friends of Khufu. This isn't guesswork. It's one of the best documented workforces in the ancient world, and it deserves to be said plainly. The case for Egyptian builders is strong, and any honest video has to start there. But here's the seam in that story, the one that never quite closes no matter how many worker villages we dig up. The evidence explains who moved the stone. It's much thinner on how they achieve the accuracy sitting inside that stone. And it's the accuracy, not the size, that keeps surfacing as the sticking point every time someone runs the numbers cold, without the comfort of a familiar narrative wrapped around them. Start with the floor, because that's where any real investigation should start. Before you ask who built something, you ask whether it's actually as precise as people claim, because that's the boring, checkable part. And it is. The base of the Great Pyramid spans over 230 meters on each side. Several football fields laid edge to edge, and across that entire footprint, the platform is level to within about 2 centimeters. Do the math on that, and you get a flatness of roughly 0.009%. To feel the size of that number, picture a slab of glass the size of a city block, where the highest and lowest points differ by less than the width of 2 fingers. Now remember, this wasn't poured as one continuous surface. It was assembled from over 2 million separate blocks of stone, some weighing as much as a loaded truck, each one leveled by hand using nothing we'd recognize as a precision tool. A trench of water to find true level, a plumb line, a wooden square, rope. Here's what makes it strange rather than just impressive. Modern construction doesn't hold itself to this standard because nothing requires it to. When engineers pour a foundation slab for a skyscraper today, the accepted tolerance for level across a large surface is noticeably looser than what's built into the floor at Giza, and nobody worries about it because a building's elevators don't care if the slab is off by a finger's width over 100 meters. By that everyday modern yardstick, the Great Pyramid's foundation is dramatically more precise than its job as a tomb would ever require. A burial chamber does not need a foundation flat to 0.009%. So why does it have one? That's not a rhetorical trick question. It's the actual open question archaeologists still debate, and nobody has a fully satisfying answer. Then there's the orientation, and this is where it gets harder to wave away. The pyramid's 4 faces aren't roughly aligned to the compass points. They're aligned to true north, true south, true east, and true west, with a margin of error measured in arc minutes, not degrees. An arc minute is a 60th of 1 degree. The whole horizon around you is 21,600 of them, and the deviation from true north here is only about 3. That's an error so small no I could ever detect it without an instrument. And remember, True north isn't what a compass shows you. A compass follows the wandering magnetic pole. True north is the actual axis the Earth spins on, and the only way to find it in the ancient world was to watch the stars circle the sky for hours and locate the still point that they all turned around. Then transfer that invisible point down into a straight line on the ground and hold that line true across 230 meters of construction. A tomb doesn't need that. A monument to a king's glory doesn't need that. Nobody standing at the base in 2560 BCE could have appreciated an alignment that fine with the naked eye, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. Maybe the alignment wasn't there for anyone alive at the time to admire. Maybe it was there for someone later, someone with the instruments to actually measure it. Now for the part of this that gets debated the most, and the part where I want to be straight with you about what's solid ground and what isn't. If you divide the pyramid's base perimeter by its original height, you get a number close to 2 times pi, the ratio that connects a circle's circumference to its radius. Mainstream Egyptologists have a plausible, unglamorous explanation for this. Ancient surveyors likely measured horizontal ground distance by rolling a drum or a cord wheel and counting rotations, and measured vertical height by stacking cubit units. Roll a wheel enough times, and you're doing circle geometry without ever naming pi. It just falls out of the method. That explanation is genuinely respected by mathematicians and historians, and it deserves real weight here, not just a passing mention before we move on to something spookier. Where people start to disagree is what happens next. Some researchers claim this same pi-like relationship shows up again, independently, in other dimensional ratios elsewhere in the structure. And separately, some claim a golden ratio relationship, phi, roughly 1.618, appears in the slope of the faces and the internal proportions, a number whose formal mathematical description doesn't appear in the written record until Greek geometers 2,000 years later. I want to be honest with you. This is contested territory. Critics, real ones, with real math backgrounds, point out that with a structure this large, you can find all sorts of numeric coincidences if you're willing to choose which measurements to compare and how loosely you round them. That's not automatically dishonest on the part of people who point these ratios out, but it is a real, documented weakness in this kind of pyramid numerology, and you deserve to hear that caveat before you hear the claim. Then there's the biggest claim of all, the one most likely to make your jaw drop, and also the one mathematicians push back on hardest. That if you multiply the pyramid's height by 43,200, you land suspiciously close to Earth's polar radius. And if you multiply the base perimeter by the same number, you land close to Earth's equatorial circumference, with 43,200 itself being the number of seconds in 12 hours. It's a genuinely striking coincidence when you first hear it stated out loud. It's also the kind of claim that depends heavily on which historical version of the cubit you use for your conversion, and small changes in that starting assumption swing the result meaningfully. Serious researchers on both sides of this debate have gone back and forth on it for decades without a clean resolution. And I'm not going to pretend to you that it's settled science, because it isn't. What I can tell you is that the actual undisputed part, the leveling, the true north alignment, is impressive enough on its own without needing to lean on the shakier numerology to make the case. So where does that leave the honest version of this question? It leaves you with a real, measured, undisputed gap, a structure whose horizontal leveling and true north orientation exceed what the tools in the official story should reliably deliver, sitting next to a pile of more speculative numerical claims that range from plausible to genuinely disputed. If you fed only the solid, measured parts of this into an unbiased analysis and asked it to explain the leveling and the alignment using nothing but rope, water troughs, wooden squares, and celestial observation, the honest answer isn't impossible. It's improbable, the kind of result that would fail more often than it would succeed, especially held consistent across every side of a structure this size for 20 years without modern surveying instruments. That's not proof of anything supernatural. It's a flag. It's the kind of thing a careful investigator writes down and refuses to file away as solved, because the workers were very skilled doesn't fully explain a tolerance 10 times tighter than we demand of our own buildings today. And that gap is exactly why the mystery hasn't gone away, and probably never fully will, no matter how many worker villages get excavated. Because the workforce evidence and the precision evidence aren't actually answering the same question. One tells you who carried the stone. The other asks how anyone without a laser level managed to make a floor flatter than most modern building codes require. Those are different puzzles, and solving one doesn't automatically solve the other. There are really only a small handful of honest ways to fill that gap, and it's worth naming them plainly instead of pretending only one is reasonable. Maybe old kingdom Egyptians had construction techniques, tools, or accumulated generational know-how that we've simply lost the direct written record of, a plausible, unglamorous possibility that doesn't require inventing any lost civilization at all. Maybe some of that skill was inherited or passed down from earlier, less documented periods of Egyptian history that left fewer traces than the Fourth Dynasty did. Maybe, and this is the version historians treat with the most caution, some of the precision claims are simply less impressive once you correct for measurement selection and rounding, and part of this mystery is really a mystery about how we tell stories with numbers. And then there's the version that gets the clicks and the goosebumps, the idea of a more advanced lost culture or outside influence. The one with the least physical evidence behind it, and the one serious archaeology is right to treat skeptically until better evidence shows up. I'm not going to tell you which one is correct because nobody honestly can yet, and anyone who tells you they've solved it with total certainty in either direction is selling you something more than they're showing you. What I'll say is this: the measured floor and the true north alignment are real, they're documented, and they are genuinely harder to explain with rope and copper chisels than most textbooks let on. The pi and phi and earth ratio claims are more contested than the confident version of this story usually admits, and you deserve to know that before you repeat them as settled fact. Somewhere between it's all solved, stop asking, and it's alien sits the actual, uncomfortable, honest answer. We don't fully know, and the not knowing is the most interesting part. So here's what I actually want from you. Not a comment agreeing with me. A comment telling me which piece of this you find hardest to explain away. Is it the leveling? The true north alignment held across 230 meters? Or do you think the pi and phi claims are doing more work in this story than the math actually supports? Say which one, and say why, because that's the conversation worth having. Not aliens versus Egyptians, but what does the evidence we can actually verify really tell us? And if you want the next structure this same kind of honest, number first breakdown gets pointed at, say so in the comments, because there's another site with its own unresolved gap between its story and its stone, and it's worth the same treatment this one just got.